Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with InsideTheU. First off, shout out to the Bravo squad. Really appreciate you guys and appreciate everybody for showing your support throughout spring football. So let's get right into it with spring game today. The big news, I guess, coming out of it is Carson Beck will be able to participate in player-led practices starting immediately, according to Coach Cristobal. In the comments he said afterwards, didn't get a chance to see Carson today, obviously, but did get a chance to see the other three quarterbacks. And that's Emory Williams, Judd Anderson, and Luke Nickel. Just a little bit about these three guys and also some other key plays in today's spring game, which unfortunately was not on TV or streamed, but I will have plenty of videos from today's spring game on the channel there. So definitely stay tuned to that. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because I think you'll be excited to see some of these highlights, some good plays by some of the receivers and the quarterback. Emory Williams had a nice 22-yard touchdown pass to Malachi Toney, the freshman, who had a really impressive day, and just talking to people afterwards, they were impressed too. You know, one of the things that stood out to me with Malachi was his ability to make plays, whether it was over the middle and, you know, extending plays and getting yards after catch, or even a touchdown that he had that didn't count. Luke Nickel was sacked on the play, they blew it dead, but he threw the ball anyways into the end zone, and it was a nice acrobatic catch, you know, where Malachi had to make a kind of a leaping catch and came down with it. So I just thought his ability was on full display today, and that's what you want to see from a young player, for a guy trying to make an impact immediately. And I think that Malachi is certainly in the mix, a guy that can certainly get opportunities this fall, this season as a freshman. He spoke afterwards, very confident guy that he can make plays at this level. And I think overall, offensively, he had the best day today, the most impressive. Again, I'll have highlights of Malachi's performance today. Another receiver had a touchdown later in the game, there in the fourth quarter, and that's Ray Joseph. Kind of took a bubble screen from Luke Nickel and then kind of weaved his way through the defense, got into the end zone, right in front of me actually, so I have a good video of that. But overall, Ray, you know, some short catches there, nothing big today out of him. And then obviously we didn't get a chance to see JoJo Trader today, dealing with an injury that he dealt with late in spring practices. So unfortunately didn't get a chance to see him in a game action. I know many people here, you know, maybe about 5,000 fans here in attendance today. So good crowd, brought in some extra bleachers. But overall, I think fans would have loved to have seen JoJo in action. The guy that I paid a lot of attention to is CJ Daniels. You know, had a chance to see him in practice, dealt with an injury, a foot injury in the offseason, so didn't get to see him at the beginning of the spring. But CJ Daniels is expected to be, if not the top receiver, certainly one of the guys in the mix. Watched him in practice a couple practices ago, but I wanted to see what he was going to do today. It was good seeing him out here. And he made a few catches, but wasn't overly impressive with some of the things he did. I would have liked to have seen him do more. I think they've got to get more out of him. One day only, certainly. I understand that. But again, when you're expecting to be one of those top guys, you wanted to see more from him today. And again, Carson Beck wasn't out here. And I think that overall, you've got to take the offensive performance today, which wasn't great at times. You know, a couple interceptions, back-to-back plays from Judd Anderson. Not good there. Running game, there were a few glimpses, you know, out of them. You know, Mark Fletcher was in here. You know, Gerard Pringle Jr. were out here. Both two guys kind of limited during the spring at times, but they were out here. Jordan Lyle made a couple nice little runs, but nothing overly spectacular. You know, and I think with the running game, and I'm kind of bouncing all over. I'll get back to the passing game a little bit, but you know, early on here in the spring game, I know everybody's going to talk about it because it stood out to a lot of people. They get inside the 5 and about a first down situation and can't punch it in. Trying to run the ball. Mark Fletcher had the last carry at the 1-yard line. Defense certainly gets credit for making plays there and getting those stops. But in the run game, you'd like to see them, you know, be able to score, obviously. That'll be something that they're going to work on. And I think, you know, situational football like that will definitely be a point of emphasis in fall practices as they get geared up for the season. And obviously, you've got to be on point in that season opener against Notre Dame. So unfortunate that they weren't able to get that going, you know, get in the end zone with the run game there, other than those 2 touchdowns there, as I mentioned, in the passing game. Luke Nickel also had another interception. So defensively, Dylan Day had a pick. That was good to see. Amari Wallace had a pick. Those two guys had the picks on Judd Anderson. Just bad throws. It was good that the defensive backs there completed the play and made plays. but overall, those throws weren't good there from Judd and Luke either. You got to protect the ball much better. But again, it's tough to judge it completely with the offense when this isn't the guy. These aren't the guys that you're expected to win games with this season. Just kind of wrapping things up with the passing game and the offense before I get to the defensive side of the ball. But I thought Brock Schott made a nice play kind of right behind me there, almost scored a touchdown. He looks like he could be a guy in the mix there at tight end. They've got young tight ends, Alex Bowman. Certainly they're kind of expecting him. It seems like expecting him to be their primary backup to Elijah Lofton. To get a chance to see him much today, but I did see him. But I think he's a guy, again, you're talking about key pieces of the offense weren't as highly involved today. So it's really hard to judge the offensive performance in terms of what it's going to look like in the fall. Now defensively, look, there were some guys that made some plays today, and Markeith Williams had the nice play there with the fourth down stand. Raul Aguirre also had a nice play there at linebacker, so good to see them. I just think Raul and Wesley Bissain, they just clearly look like they're going to be the top two linebackers for this team. And certainly, when we're speaking about all of this, whether it's the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball, we'll see what kind of additions are made in the transfer portal when the spring window opens immediately here next week. So, but overall, with the defense, you got to see some guys on the defensive side make some plays, some young guys. But my big takeaway overall with the defense, heard it again from interviews afterwards from the players. Players are talking a lot about Corey Heatherman's defense, what it means for them at the different position groups, the communication improvement at linebacker. The defensive line really likes that they're going to be able to get vertical. And they talked about in the secondary, Cristobal talks about all the time, they're getting lined up correctly, and certainly in the secondary there were some issues there last year. So you're hearing all three levels, all three units, and how it kind of affects them with the new defense. But my big takeaway with the defense is, and we're hearing a lot about how it's a simpler defense, allowing guys to play fast and free. We're hearing that term quite a bit, again, from different guys. And for me, when I hear all of this, I think it's really just going to be on the players this year. A lot of responsibilities are being placed on them to make plays, play fast and free, get lined up and essentially just go make a play. That seems to be what they're expecting the players to do. And the players like this. They're saying they're encouraged by it. Now, they've got to deliver, and I think it starts up front with the defensive line. You're hearing a lot about playing vertical and just essentially beat your man, beat your offensive lineman in situations off the ball. So let's see that happen. Let's see these defensive linemen make plays essentially in a way on their own, whether, regardless of stunts or different movements with the defensive line. I think they're just putting a lot of responsibilities on the players, and I'm very curious to see how the players are going to respond. Certainly they seem to like everything that they're being able to do in the spring. But again, that is my immediate thought. That's the thing I've been thinking about quite a bit throughout the spring, is that I think there's just going to be a lot of responsibility on the players. Same way at linebacker. Go make plays. Guys in the secondary, they're expected to make plays, and there are a lot of new guys out here in the secondary. I touched on some guys earlier that made plays, but a lot of new guys. Xavier Lucas, Poyser is a guy at safety. Look, I felt like there wasn't enough plays being made at the safety position. I'm very curious to see how that's going to shake out. I think that definitely is a position that they've got to be good at. Certainly the defense wasn't good enough last year, and I think key pieces, in addition to Corey Heatherman's defense, it will be important in the transfer portal. But I'm very curious to see how the coaching staff is going to kind of evaluate, not just today, but the entire spring with what they need moving forward. And I will say, Coach Cristobal talked about the transfer portal. He talked about it the other day about what he expects, but he talked about essentially this hardline stance. If guys are going to hold out. He said, if you're going to hold out, then get out. So just that hardline stance about how to deal with players. If they want to go to the transfer portal, dealing with their NIL opportunities and their situations there. So I'm fascinated to see how it's all going to play out for the Hurricanes moving forward in the offseason. But overall, once again, good being out here for the spring. I'm curious to see the future of spring games, not just at Miami, but in college football. As you know, spring games are very important to me personally, because I would not be doing this, literally would not be doing this if it weren't for one spring game, the very first spring game I attended, essentially how I got my career going as a sports journalist. So I'm in big favor, but again, I think it was a good environment for the fans. Looking at the bleachers, they had a nice little setup, a little fan fest setup, and had some autographs. And right behind me, I hear the baseball team is playing. It sounds like it was Derek Williams just hit a home run. So that's a great call from J-Row there. But I'm going to wrap this up. I want to appreciate everybody once again, like at the beginning. I said, appreciate everybody's support for all these videos. But stay tuned to the channel. Plenty of videos, plenty of highlights from the spring game today. So thanks again for watching. Have a good rest of the day. Have a good rest of the weekend. Thanks for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And take care.